Hello and welcome to this video in which we're going to take a look at 7 ways you can make your golf equipment last longer. We'll offer some advice on everything from your clubs through to your gloves and grips and shoes to ensure that the money you do spend on golf equipment goes as far as it possibly can. Guys, if you're new to the Golf Monthly channel, please do hit the subscribe button to make sure that you don't miss any of our videos. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button as well. But let's take a look at the 7 ways in which you can make your golf equipment last longer, starting with your wedges. Okay, so when it comes to your wedges, there is a reality that every golfer needs to confront, and that reality is that over time you will not get as much spin control from an older wedge as you will from a newer wedge. Effectively, every time you hit a bunker shot with your wedge, you're sandblasting the face of it, you're reducing that kind of friction that you get from sharp grooves, you're making the face of the wedge smoother, and you'll be reducing the amount of spin on off, and that doesn't only affect the way that the ball reacts on the greens, but it also changes the ball flight slightly. And you want to do what you can to guard against that degradation. And there are a few things that you can do. Firstly, something that I always do is when I go to the range and I hit sort of hard range balls and I'm warming up, I never ever use my most lofted wedge, the one that I use for the majority of my short game shots around the green. I always start from one of my sort of gap wedges and go up from there. And the other thing to say is about practicing your short game. How often do you spend practicing your short game? If you're someone that does spend a bit of time on it, it might just be worth using an older wedge for that practice. Now, appreciate not everybody out there is going to have 2 lob wedges lying around that they could happily use for their practice, but if you do, maybe it's worth deploying an older wedge. I know this one doesn't look older than this one, but it is. This has a raw finish. This one has a sort of standard chrome finish. And I'd be tempted to use this one if I was practicing my short game, especially my bunker play, just to preserve the grooves on the wedge that goes in my bag. Of course, there will be a difference in the way the ball reacts when it hits the greens, and you'll have to take that into account. But if you're working on your technique, if you're working on some of the basics, then perhaps using a slightly older wedge might just be the way to do it. If you want to give your golf clubs a new lease of life, then think about cleaning your grips with some hot soapy water. It can make a really big difference. Of course, the grips are the only things that come into contact with your hands, and your hands are in contact with things like sun cream and sweat and anything else that you might be handling during a round of golf, and that can get into the grip and cause them to become shiny, cause them to become smooth, and result in a lack of traction. Now, before coming out here today, I cleaned the grip of my 8-iron here, and I didn't clean the grip of my 9-iron. And I can certainly see there's a huge difference in the colour of these 2 grips. By just doing that process, I've given my 8-iron a new lease of life. And these golf clubs that I'm using here, the grips are only about sort of 7 or 8 months old themselves. So this should be a job you do once every few months, and it will give a new lease of life to your grips, but it will also make your golf clubs feel like new. Okay, so number 4 on the list relates to these things, your head covers. Now, of course, I'd advocate having head covers, particularly for your woods and your putter. I'm not someone that goes for iron head covers, although I know a lot of people out there do swear by them. For me, they're a little bit too much of a faff, and I don't mind those sort of little slight nicks and scrapes that you get on irons. For me, that's just general sort of wear and tear. However, head covers on woods and putters, I would say, are a must. And the one piece of advice I would give you relating to your head covers, if you've played in the rain, then afterwards take your head covers off and let them dry out before you put them back on your golf clubs. What you don't want is a damp head cover sort of sitting for hours and hours on end on a piece of sort of exposed metal that could then rust, because it can then make your golf clubs sort of look and feel sort of dirty and old in a way that you definitely want to avoid. So if you played in the rain, take your head covers off, put them to one side, let them dry out before you put them back on your golf clubs, and you'll prevent your clubs from rusting. Okay, so next to talk to you about on my list is your gloves. And there's a few things you can do here that can really help extend the lifespan. Firstly, do not start practicing with new gloves. There's just no point. For me, what I do is I have a selection of slightly old gloves like this one here, which is, as you can see, a little bit discoloured. It's a bit worn, but it's not too bad. It offers pretty good traction. I keep that in a separate pocket in my golf bag, and I use this glove and a couple of others whenever I'm practicing. The next point relates to bad weather, and if you do play a lot of golf, or if you play any golf in the wet, I would really recommend you go and get yourself a pair of wet weather gloves. These are Mac Wet gloves, but I think all of the, or most of the premium brands will have a wet weather option that you can use. You'll have two gloves, one for both hands, and the wetter they become, the more traction they offer. And if ever you've had a golf club slip in your hands when you're playing in the wet, you'll know how frustrating that can become. This really does guard against that really, really well. A couple of things to bear in mind with this. Firstly, if you're playing in really cold weather, these can make your hands quite cold. And secondly, some people don't like them because they're quite thick and they reduce the amount of feel you get from your clubs. For me, I'm a big fan of them. I think they really work very well indeed. And the last point I'll make, again, is about bad weather. Let's say you've been out there playing in sort of teeming rain all day long and all of your golf bag is soaked. One of the things that you definitely need to care about is your gloves. Take them all out of your golf bag, put them on a sort of airer, but don't put them on the radiator. Putting them on the radiator will make the leather become hard, it will start to crack, it will offer a horrible feel next time you put it onto your hands. Let them dry naturally and they will sort of be restored to their former glory. Likewise, if you've been playing really hot weather and you've been sweating all day, take that golf glove out of your bag after you play and let it dry naturally. There's nothing worse than going into your bag, getting a glove out that you think should be fine, and actually it starts cracking once you put it on your hands. It's a horrible feel. You really want to avoid that. Hopefully some of those tips relating to your gloves will help extend the life of them, help you get that little bit more value for money. Okay, next on the list is something that relates to your driver, and I think it's something that can potentially happen to quite a few people out there. Let's say you've made a purchase in the driver market, you bought a new driver at the start of the year, and then after 6 months or so you've sort of slightly fallen out of love with it. You're not hitting it quite as well as you used to, and it's becoming something that you're battling with. If you do fall into that category, think about going back to your pro and going for a retro fitting. Ask the pro just to tinker with the setup. Maybe there's something in the loft or the lie or the weight setup of the golf club that can just be tweaked, can be tinkered with. It might be that by just making a few minor tweaks to the setup, you're able to get it back to the performance that you were able to get when you first were fitted for it. And if you do that, you should be able to extend the lifespan of your driver. The best way to extend the lifespan of your golf balls, of course, is to not lose them. Something we can all do with working on. However, there is a little bit more to it than that. Now, I'm going to talk here specifically about practicing your short game, and it makes a lot of sense to practice your short game using exactly the same make and model of golf ball that you use on the golf course so that you're getting used to the feel of it. But for me, I never use brand new golf balls when I'm practicing my short game. Instead, I have 3 golf balls that I keep in a different pocket of my bag, the same pocket that I keep my slightly old glove in, and these are the ones I use to practice my short game. It means that I know I'm going to get exactly the same feel that I'm expecting on the golf course, but, and crucially, it means that I'm not going to be scuffing up or causing any damage to the brand new Pro V1Xs that are waiting to be played with in my golf bag. So maybe that's just me, maybe that's not going to make a huge amount of difference. It's something that I like to do. I like to ensure that when I'm competing for real, I'm using a brand new golf ball as opposed to one that's had little scuffs, little marks on it from a little bit of short game practice. Okay, so the last one on my list relates to golf shoes. Now, modern day golf shoes can be pretty expensive. Of course, the technology has improved over time. What you're getting for your money is really good, but it definitely makes sense to add a few steps, take that little bit of time to look after your golf shoes to ensure that you get as much use out of them as you possibly can. Now, I don't know about you, but I have my own sort of favourite pair of golf shoes. These are them. These are the ones that I use in sort of competition play, and they're the ones that I sort of look after the most that I possibly can. Now these are now 2 years old, and hopefully you can see they're in pretty good shape still because I've tried to look after them as best I can. Now it depends how sort of into this stuff you are, and I must admit the older I get the more into it I become. A good thing to do is to have some baby wipes stored in your car after every round of golf. Just give them a very quick clean. 1 minute of cleaning your golf shoes will mean that that bit of dirt that's got stuck on the toe or in the heel, wherever it might be, doesn't then become ingrained and impossible to get out later down the line. There's a really annoying little mark here on the toe of my left shoe that I wish I'd got out when I first got that mark, because now I can't seem to get it out. The next thing relates to wet weather. If you're playing in wet weather, then you need to take steps to look after your shoes after you've played. Of course, take them out of your shoe bag. This one's a sort of fur-lined shoe bag. That would not be good for the leather. I tend to take these out and store them in my garage at home, let them dry sort of naturally. Definitely don't put your shoes on the radiator. Same with your golf gloves. If you put leather on the radiator, it will dry really quickly, it will crack, and then ultimately your shoes will become redundant a little bit sooner than you wanted to. And finally, the last thing to think about doing is to get a shoe tree or something to stuff underneath the toes of your shoes. Now, I'll hold my hands up here and admit this isn't something I do, but as I said earlier, the older I get, the more into this stuff I become. I think I might start doing it pretty soon. I might get some old socks, shove them into the toes of the shoes just to prevent the leather from cracking up here in the toe area, which is something that started to sort of bug me a little bit in recent times, just to keep them looking as new as possible for as long as possible. So 3 tips there for looking after your shoes. Hopefully it means you get the best possible value for money out of your purchase in new golf shoes. Okay, so there you have it. Those are my 7 best ways to increase the lifespan of your golf equipment. If you've enjoyed the video, please do hit the like button and also comment below. Do you have any tips of your own? Anything that's worked really well for you in the past? We'd be really interested to hear your thoughts and share them amongst the community of people who are watching our videos. Guys, thank you very much for watching, but for West Hill, for now, it's goodbye.